Hello and welcome to this Get Together session brought to you by getAbstract. My name is Michael. I'm executive editor at getAbstract and responsible for our new journal that went online a couple of weeks ago. The topic of today's session is the human side of leading virtual teams. And I'm glad to welcome our head of client services for Europe, the Middle East, and Africa at getAbstract, Frances van Spijkeren. Hi, Frances.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me.
You are leading an armada of customer success managers and sales executives on several continents from your desk in Switzerland. Let's jump right in.
An armada, maybe that's a nice way to put it. I think maybe from my experience and maybe what I wanted to share today is actually I've been used to leading a virtual team, well, actually partly virtual and partly face-to-face working in the office. And I think the big transition for us has been that actually as a team, we're now all virtual. And I think we've learned a lot from those challenges. And I think it's been really nice to kind of walk in the same shoes of some of the people that are working all the time virtual in our team. And I think we've learned a lot from that. And so I think it's really important now when we talk about going back to kind of what we want to call the new normal, that we kind of think about some of those challenges, think about what we learn, and also see a kind of which are the parts we want to keep as we go forward.
Yes, sure. So maybe many people all around the world, they did get used to the up and downsides of working remotely within the last weeks, especially in Europe and in the US, I guess, where a lot of people weren't used to that kind of working before. So when I asked you personally and professionally, what did the last 6 weeks teach you that you did not know before?
I think particularly looking at this from a leadership perspective and how I've worked together with my team, I think for me personally, it's been less about the challenge of technology and more about the human skills that we need to remember sometimes that are so important in the way we work. And I think especially my team is very young, is very used to technology, and we're used to this constant change. But actually, what we're not used to is this need that that's the only thing we have to rely on, that virtual interaction. And I think just taking the time to remember and consider the human side of the skills that we need to operate the best in that kind of environment.
Yeah, so at getAbstract, we try to find and to rate and to compress and to put into context the relevant knowledge of our time. And every get-together session deals with one specific abstract, at least. And when I asked you to pick an abstract you wanted to talk about, you chose a successful Hollywood producer and screenwriter Brian Graze's Face to Face as a summary to talk about. By the way, and before we start discussion of the abstract, did you know that his films and TV series have been nominated for, I'm quoting, 43 Academy Awards and 187 Emmys?
Definitely a cool statistic, Michael, and I think it really highlights there actually the breadth of knowledge we're looking at. And actually we need to look at experience and knowledge from lots of different places and see how that can apply to our teams and to what's going on in our businesses. And I think it's a really nice statistic, but shows how we can also take experience from unexpected places.
Mm-hmm. So at first glance, your choice looks a little bit weird, just to say so. So this book is a book about physical presence, human emotions based on it, about eye contact specifically, about curiosity and trust. And I think all this is hardly possible remotely, or at least I am still struggling to find my way to deal with screens rather than with faces. And when you say we need to focus on the human side, so what does that actually mean in this case?
Mm-hmm. And I think, yeah, you're right in saying it's perhaps at first glance a strange choice. And I think for me, the reason I picked it is really because a lot of the things it talks about, yes, are more traditionally associated with being physically in a room with someone, with meeting somebody, but actually just to to be aware that these things are important. And actually, as we engage in virtual discussions, as we engage in sessions with our team, we need to consider that if some of these elements are missing, how can we put that back into our day-to-day? And how can we make, as a leader, encourage that kind of environment where we can still use all of those things that are wonderful about human connections? I think technology, we're often used to using it to streamline processes and to help us get things done quicker. But we can also use it for that element of human connection, for having creative discussions, for collaborating, for encouraging that kind of camaraderie of working together in a team and working together. Traditionally, things that are associated with being physically close, but in this world that we're in, we need to make sure we find the right environment and create the right environment virtually, that we can still benefit from all of those great things. Yes, I don't know if I quite answered your question there. You want to?
Yes, and you came up with a quote from the book that you decided to just read or to quote. So maybe you do it right now.
Yeah, it's really one of my favorite things that I picked out of the abstract. And it says, in a world where our attention is too often focused downward or elsewhere, simply lifting your eyes to meet another's gaze can be transformative. And that's a quote that really resonated with me. And I think we're so busy doing things. We're in our mobile phones, we're in emails. And I think, especially as part of those virtual interactions, we're often doing other things in the background. And I think it's really important to highlight, when I'm working with my team or I'm having conversations with my team, let's keep that a safe space to have that conversation so we can really build that relationship. And let's put those other things aside. Let's look each other in the eyes and have that conversation. And, there's really no barrier that you can't do that using technology. And I think that quote really resonated with me, to say, actually, eye contact is such an important thing. And I'm hoping that I'm engaging in eye contact with you now, Michael, as we talk about this. But I think it's just something that we have to practice and get used to, when we're also using virtual tools.
Yes, and you already mentioned distractions. I think there's constantly something beeping and calling in and plopping on and something. So you really have to focus. And when we decided to do those get-togethers in the first place, this interactional aspect was one of the goals to achieve. So to really interact from home office to home office to discuss a topic. But I think it's quite hard, and people are struggling with that, to really focus on these those face-to-face meetings and giving good feedback and reliable feedback and something you can work something out of it and get something out of it. So how can you, as a leader, help your team to focus on those human skills these days, because their task lists and to-do lists are growing and growing and growing, right?
Yeah, I think one of the first things that I realized as kind of my whole team went into kind of this virtual environment, I really realized that actually the importance of the frequency of communication from my side. I had to think about, how do we manage that best, and what do we do? What's enough and what's too much? How am I reaching out and having conversations with my team so that they feel supported and that they feel, I'm there, and that they feel that kind of environment, but without overwhelming people. And I think internally within getAbstract, we've done some great initiatives about kind of virtual coffee sessions and team building sessions, all done virtually. But we also really need to make sure that that's not too much and people still have the time and space to focus on what they need to do. I also think, one of the things that I'm been trying to do with my team to get them to really focus on those human skills is also to create opportunities where the team can share. So really to try and facilitate that collaboration and sharing of experiences. I think that the abstract also talks about sharing stories, and that being a way to captivate people. And I think we need to find those kind of virtual environments where we can create opportunity for people to share stories and share experiences that are going to kind of motivate people and give them fresh ideas about what they can do within their teams. Maybe to give you a... Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Michael.
it's kind of hard, right, to find that balance, because if you're around all the time, people might think you're some kind of micromanager and just sneaking up behind them and watching over their shoulders and everything. And then the other way around, they need to focus on their tasks, and maybe they don't even have time to join a nice virtual coffee session or whatever. So how do you engage with your team and engage your team?
And to give you my honest input on that, it's really been about trial and error. This environment is quite new for lots of us, and I think it's about asking for feedback. And I think now what we've learned, we need to say, that's the strategy we want to use going forward. As some people may return to the office, some people might be working from home more, but to try and keep those boundaries in the right place. And I think, I've just been asking my team in the beginning, is this too much? Is this enough? And really working out what's that right communication strategy. I think in terms of creating that safe space for collaboration and discussion, I think that's something you as a manager and as a leader have to purposely carve that space out. And that time when people can share stories and share experiences. And what's really important when people are working virtually is that you find a way to engage everybody in that discussion. So not just maybe the people that are very chatty and are the first people to join the call and start the conversation, but how do you encourage the whole team as part of that discussion? And I think, we've had some success internally of kind of using some icebreakers at the start of conversations, maybe a question at the beginning that says, what's the one thing you've learned this week? Or, for example, even using getAbstract content, using an abstract and asking everybody to share their opinion on that abstract, but really getting people to join that virtual call and everybody to contribute. And I think that's really the leader's role, to make sure that they are facilitating that kind of discussion and facilitating that kind of exchange.
So that's maybe the exact opposite of what micromanagers achieve these days. So if they come up with their task lists and their set to-do lists and whatever, and trying to check back with their staff all the time, they are building a culture of maybe anger, fear, and resentment. And your goal is the opposite. To quote you, you told me your goal is to create a culture of empathy and trust. So you came up with a list of 6 bullets about the keys to success here. Maybe you tell us a little more about those 6 bullets.
Yeah, exactly. And I've heard quite some conversation about this concept of trust when people are working virtually, that the manager must trust their team, that they're working and they're achieving their goals and they're engaged. But from my perspective as a manager, I really see it as very much as a two-way process. You have to build that environment of trust and empathy, that you care about the person sitting on the other end of the virtual call, and that's something that we would do anyway, as all most good managers would look to do, is to create that environment of empathy and trust. But I think the virtual element is really just thinking about the things that may become more natural when you're face to face with someone, thinking about actually putting those into the conversation when you're working virtually. So, for example, we talk about creating a coaching environment where you're asking questions of your employees or asking questions of your team members and trying to encourage them to come up with solutions themselves. I think it would be very easy to come up with a kind of, these are the things that are on the to-do list and where are we with XYZ project when we're working virtually, but forget those coaching elements. So, forget the elements that are really around coming up with those solutions and working together to really generate that feedback. So I think that coaching environment is certainly a really important kind of human element to consider when working virtually. But ultimately, it's about creating that open, safe space where it's a two-way process to really engage with your team members and get their feedback, get their input. And personally for me, it's been a strange experience, because I've been used to seeing my team, and when you see people all the time, you understand maybe from that level of empathy. You understand maybe where people are a little stressed, or they have a lot to do, or they're challenged by a particular project. You can kind of see some of those emotions. And I think that's why it's really, for me, a two-way process, because what is really important to me is that my team also push back. So the things that I can't see, they let me know and they tell me, and we have that honest relationship that they can say, hey, actually, I'm overwhelmed. I need some support from somebody here. And I have to trust in my team that they will tell me that, because I can't necessarily see, as I have in the past, that they need that support.
And that's where those curiosity conversations come in, right? I mean, Grazer talks about that, or writes about that in his book. What are these curiosity conversations all about?
Yeah, I think it's about coming up with solutions. And I think it's about working as a collaborative team to come up with solutions. And, sometimes you have to get into the nitty-gritty of stuff, and you have to talk about things to really come up with those creative solutions and have kind of interesting conversations. And I think we need to make time and space for that when we're working virtually, and remember to do that. I also, one of the other things I also wanted to talk about, and I also think worth mentioning, is also this camera culture. And I'm really surprised to see also that with clients and with my team, that actually more and more people are turning on their cameras. And I think just encouraging people to do that, whether that's your team or whether it's customers, just saying, hey, why not turn on the camera? And really having that culture that the camera is there to make someone feel like they're in the room. And actually, I learned this a couple of years ago from one of my customers who at that point had a really strong culture where they were saying to all employees, kind of any call where we're engaging like this, we should have the cameras turned on. And it was actually a really interesting experience to see, working with him, that actually the way he behaved on camera was very natural, because he wasn't looking at his image or looking at how things came across. He was just acting as he would if he was sat in a meeting room with somebody. So, picking up a glass of water, taking a drink, acting like you're in a room with somebody, and not having this conscious feeling that you're being recorded. And I think as a leader, really encouraging people to get past that hurdle and turn the cameras on is also a really important thing to do.
We're touching a little a sensitive topic here, right? Many companies and organizations wonder these days about the future of their performance review processes. So we all know that there's a yearly get-together, some kind of feedback session with your executive, with your superior, and the other way around. And those meetings and those performance reviews, they don't work. They don't really work in the current situation. What kind of feedback can you give if everyone gets used to a completely new working environment? So what's your take on it? I mean, what do you recommend in this particular situation? Do you keep up with those standard models, or do you have to adjust to a more agile way? And this is the perfect situation to do so.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head there. In a lot of these scenarios, a lot of things we're learning about working virtually, and we're seeing the benefits. Actually being forced to do them maybe encourages us to kind of take hold of them and maybe use some of those things going forward. And I think the performance review element is one of them. If I take a lot of the experience from the customers we work with, there are lots of different ways of doing performance reviews and managing those conversations. And many companies have different strategies for how they want to do that. But I think there is some kind of consensus in the fact talking about performance, talking about development is a continuous conversation. And is it something that whether you do yearly or half yearly performance reviews or not, the conversations about development and growth should be happening all the time anyway. And I think it comes back to that element of coaching culture, the element of curious conversations. If you're engaging with your team in that kind of way, those conversations are going to be happening naturally all the time. And I think, one of the potential downsides that that I actually read about in an abstract to say, how are people managing virtual working, was that maybe people feel ignored when it comes to kind of career development and performance conversations. And I think that's absolutely something we have to consider and remember, especially if teams are split and partly virtually and partly not, to remember that actually we need to make those same opportunities available to everybody and find a way really, to engage in those conversations and make sure, everybody has the same opportunities. So that's certainly something I would say I would like to learn from and see what happens in the future, and how we kind of incorporate that virtual element into the process we use for that in the future.
Yeah, we talked a lot now about some kind of feel-good factor. So you can trust each other. You are not feeling left alone or left behind or whatever, even if you are not a communicative type or kind of guy. But the feel-good factor is only one side of the whole topic, right? In the other side is gaining more traction, and also that this effort leads to a better performance of the whole team, right? And so how do you make sure that this leads to a better performance and not to a lot of freeloaders who are just sitting around and chatting and having nice coffees and whatever? I think you have a special managing type for it too, right? You must have some tools to prevent these kind of freeloading issues.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, creating this environment of sharing and kind of having this open culture, are definitely things that lead to this kind of feel good factor and people feeling good. And I think, that's not something that, is bad for the company or bad for the team. I think on the other on it's really very much an important part of the team, because I feel it really helps us to increase engagement and increase ownership. And I think that's certainly what I've seen, from personal experience with my team. I've actually very much seen this problem-solving culture. It was very easy for people in the past to ask me questions and to ask me, okay, what do I do with this scenario? But now actually they're thinking about before coming to me straight away and asking me that question. They're trying to come up with a solution first, or they're thinking, do I really need to give Frances a call and ask her this question? And I think that's very much leading to this problem-solving culture where people are trying to really identify solutions to things. And, that's, a fantastic thing for the team. And I think it really shows that level of engagement. Also the want to engage and collaborate in projects perhaps outside of our team. People are seeking that, want to be involved, want to connect to people. And I think that ultimately makes for really engaged employees and really engaged teams, which is ultimately what we're all looking to try and achieve, for the success of the business as well.
So if I get all that right, the new normal many organizations are waiting for will not be the old normal, because large parts of the industries, of organizations, of companies, they got pretty much used to this new type of working. There's still work in progress, a lot to learn from day to day. But when I get you right, this new normal is really a new normal and not the old normal and the normal everyone was used to until late February.
Yeah. And I think, it's going to look very different for all sorts of organizations and all sorts of different industries. So I think, to say a blanket statement, we can't really do that. But I think my key to the way we move forward, and I think for most people, it has to be about balance. It has to be about finding what is the right balance for your company, your industry, your team, and what is going to make sense. And I think it's having that conscious decision-making process about the way you want to work and how that fits to the best needs of the individuals in the team, as the team as a group, and really just having that conscious decision-making about how we want to work and how we want to move forward. And then if there are certain elements to that, so if more people are working from home, what are the skills we need to develop and what are the skills we need to focus on when we're doing that in order to be the most successful in what we're doing? So for me, it's about balance and it's about consciousness and having those conversations to say, how do we want to work and how do we want to improve?
Cool, Frances. So thank you very much. I think our time is pretty much up. There were a lot of great insights from your side, and I wonder where this huge work from home experiment, as it was called, may lead us in our more and more virtual teams sooner or later. I'm actually getting pretty used to it these days. Thank you, Frances, for standing by, for being with us today. And thank you all for watching this Get Together session. Make sure to grab a copy of Brian Grace's book as soon as your local bookstore reopens, or go to getAbstract.com to get free access to this and over 20,000 other books until May 18th. If you need more inspiration, there is another Get Together tomorrow on a different topic at the same time. Stay safe, everybody, and thanks for watching. Bye.
Bye.
Extraordinary challenges require extraordinary responses from thought leaders, company executives, and employees. As the coronavirus pandemic unfolds and businesses scramble to adapt to escalating containment efforts, getAbstract is here to help organizations navigate this crisis wisely and professionally. For over 20 years, we've been committed to providing relevant knowledge from reliable sources to help people make better decisions in their personal and professional lives. In line with our mission to empower decision makers with relevant knowledge from trusted sources, we are proud to offer businesses free access to our full library until May 18. Embark on a no-strings-attached knowledge journey with getAbstract. Sign up today.